It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to make a game. I was about 16, 18-ish, and I wanted to play a game about horses because I was at that age where I started to go to school. Like you go to university at some time when I was 20, I got my own place, and it's just getting trickier and trickier to be around horses. My aunt already moved away when I was quite young, so I didn't really have access to her farm and horses anymore. And when I went to school, you don't really have the time or the budget anymore to go horse riding. So that's kind of when I thought, okay, how can I still, you know, get some part of this passion, this hobby of mine without actually being able to be with horses? And that's why I thought, okay, horse games. But around that time, you had a lot of games that were very childish. And I remember specifically that there was a Barbie game. And this Barbie game was, yeah, I always explain it to people. You got a horse, and it was all in 3D, and then you had to brush the horse. And then, so you go with your mouth. You're like, oh, brush the horse, yay. That was my little, sarcasm, like, oh, yay, I'm brushing my digital horse. It's one of those things where I feel like that is fun in real life if you have to touch a real horse and you can feel the warmth and, you can kind of cuddle with it. But on a screen, it felt just really, really boring. And the other part was things that you're going into the fantasy kind of stuff, like My Little Pony. It became very childish, very colorful, things with like unicorns and Pegasi. And I just felt like this is just not it for me. I can see how that works for maybe 12-year-old girls, but not for someone who is reaching and entering adulthood. So that's kind of when I thought, okay, it's not there. I can't find it, at least. Maybe it was there, but I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, can't I make something myself? And at that time, the only thing that I knew was HTML and CSS. So I don't know how much the listeners will know, but it's kind of like the first building bricks of making a website.
Yeah.
And it's all very static, but I thought, well, that is something that I'm familiar with, so maybe I can make something in the form of a website. I think that's kind of how the whole thing started. And it was just a hobby project. I was just thinking like, oh, it would be fun if. Well, I think initially the intention was not even to make a realistic horse game. I think the intention was I wanted to make a horse game towards adults. And I already knew I don't know anything 3D. I haven't worked with Unity, Unreal, whatever else there is out there. So I thought things with website making, I got the basics, so that is something I can do. I know that around that time you had these websites that were called, I know you had Omerta Barafranca, I don't know how you exactly pronounce it, but it was this kind of like mobster game where you had to play a gangster, and it was like, oh, steal candy from a baby, and then you grow to steal a car, and you become a real mobster. And it was very forum-based, and I just kind of felt like, oh, that is the kind of stuff that I could do. So since it was a website, I started looking for domain names. Obviously, everything with the words horse, pony, world, game, everything was already taken. And interestingly, there was one, I think it's called horseworld.com, and it still has the exact same whitish page that it had when I wanted that domain name. And I even emailed the people, we're like, oh, can I please buy this domain? And they were like, no, we're going to do something with it. I think we're now 15 years later. It's still the same page. But I was looking for a domain name and everything was taken. And at some point I stumbled upon Horse Reality. And I just thought that actually sounds kind of nice, because often what you see with games like League of Legends becomes LOL.
Yeah.
Everybody makes it short. So then, okay, Horse Reality becomes HR. Not really realizing at the time that it's also human resources.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean that everything in our game is super realistic, but the genetic system is based on reality. And that is kind of how we got started with that. So yeah, initially it wasn't even the intention, but we kind of landed there. And I think that is how game development goes.
So did you have any target groups or players in mind when creating the game, or was it just because you wanted to play this game?
Yeah, I would say initially it was really because what I wanted, because it was just kind of like this hobby project. I was just talking with my friend and we were like, oh, well, a domain name, what does it cost? $15 a year, something like that. I was already doing some website stuff. So I thought, oh, this is just a fun little side project that I can work on. And in the beginning, it was just me and her and another friend. And we played some other horse games that were slowly dying out. So that's where we met a few other people. So I think in the very early stages, I think we were maybe with 10, 15 people on that server, just kind of playing around, seeing what we could do. And that, I think, was really the starting point where I just wanted to make a game more geared towards adults. And then the few friends that I had made on other games kind of joined in. And they were also like, oh, but it would also be cool if, and then the ball kind of keeps rolling because everybody has ideas.
Yeah. So you started off with alone, of course, or with the two of you, and then you grew out to be like 10 or 15 people on the server. Currently, you have like 20,000 players monthly.
Yes.
And it's a free game, free to play, right?
Yeah.
Where does the money come from?
Yeah, that's always an interesting question. People are always curious about that. If I tell people that I'm running a game studio and I made a horse game, people are always like, but how do you earn money with this? Everybody's always really confused. So for people who don't really come from the game industry, they are always surprised. They always think like, oh, how do people earn money with it? But actually for people who play games, it's quite common to spend money on games. And it's quite similar to how everything works on mobile games, to be honest. Like a lot of times when you play a game, you can buy this kind of, special currency in the game. And in a lot of games, it's like diamonds or some kind of cash. So what we have is we call it Delta points. And a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually just a fun little inside joke. Del from Deloryan, and then Ta from Tamara, who I originally started this game
your
with.
friends, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so we just kind of combined it. I was like, oh, Delta points. Oh, that sounds kind of nice. Let's go with that. And with those Delta points, you can then do other stuff in the game. Like you can buy backgrounds for your horses, for example, to imagine like it's on this beautiful mountain in America, for example. And then, so it's mostly decorative, but you can also buy extra stables. So it is free to play. So a lot of people play the game just entirely for free. You can get 50 stables just with the cash you earn in the game. But after that, you need to buy stables with Delta points. So the more horses you want to keep, the more money you will need to spend. But we tried finding ways to also make sure that the people who can't spend money on the game have an ability or an option to get there. So you can also earn the Delta points in the game. And we also have a currency exchange, which is really popular with the people who do like to spend money. Because then for them, it's an easy way to get the Horse Reality coins again. And then the person who wants the Delta points can then exchange it for that. So we try to give the people options that if you want to spend money on us and support us, buy the Delta points or get a premium subscription. But you don't have to. Like we still have a lot of options for people who can't spend or don't want to spend money on the game.
So how do you breed the perfect horse?
That's a good question. It depends on what you're looking for. No, I think we have a few factors that we tie in with Horse Reality. So we have something that we call genetic potential. That is quite important. So the genetic potential, how I usually explain it, it's kind of like the talent a horse has, the potential it has to be great, so to say. So it's, if you think of soccer, for example, if your parents are both great at soccer, it doesn't guarantee that if you get born, you're also good at it. You will still need training. You will still need to do stuff. Yeah. But the fact that your parents are really good at it does probably add in with the fact how talented you are or what you have genetically.
Like Max Verstappen, right? Yeah, with racing parents. And
yeah, for example. So it's kind of like some of the stuff is built in your genes, but it doesn't mean that, you automatically will be super good, so to say. So we tie in a few of those factors. So the genetic potential is one of them. So that's how talented you are. Then we have some other stats for health, for example. We have the color genetics, which is what color will this horse get. And I think the whole combination of everything together is what I would define as a good horse. But the thing is, do you want a specific color? Then what you would like is you want that color and you want all the stats as high as possible. And what you will see, because there are so many genetic options and variations in the game, that the chance is very small that you're going to get that one perfect horse. But the more you keep breeding, the higher those stats will become in the end. So you can get there at some point. But yeah, a lot of times what we did in the past is that we divided the genetics in different continents in the game. And if people would buy a horse out of Africa, for example, maybe that one had good health, and then the special colors were available in Europe, for example. So you still have to, combine those to get those stats up. So it was quite difficult in the beginning, but now a lot of players play the game, and they've been breeding a lot. So now they sell their horses, which are already quite good.
Do they die in your game, the horses?
Yes, yeah. So we are horse reality, so horses can die of old age.
And get sick also?
We have not implemented that. One of the things that we had on the list for quite a while, I don't know if it is gonna come eventually, because it's a very tricky balance in gaming. It's like you want realism, but you don't want it, too much.
You don't want your players to go away if they lose 2 or 3 horses in 1 week, right?
Yeah, or if it's not even about losing horses, but it's losing the best horse. Like if you put in all this effort to get that horse, you bred generation after generation. Now you finally get that one that you've put so much effort in, and you spend 3 million coins in the game to get that horse or whatsoever. And then tomorrow you get a message like, oh yeah, your horse got sick, it died. That would be very frustrating. And I don't want the people to rage quit the game. Like you want them to keep coming back. And I think if you implement that kind of realism, that very quickly it becomes annoying and frustrating. And I think that is always the one balance that we're trying to aim for. So one of the things that we have implemented, for example, is something that we call the ovarolethal white syndrome. It's a very difficult word, but basically it is kind of a genetic defect, which when the foal gets born and it has 2 copies of that gene, it means the intestines are not fully developed. So it basically means this horse cannot poop.
Yeah.
If you cannot poop, where does it go?
Yeah.
So in real life, this horse will not live for more than 72 hours. And if you keep it alive that long, then it's going to die in excruciating pain.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things that we implemented.
To let it go.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we implemented in the game, that if you get the horse that is born with that defect, which is a color genetic, then you get a message that it was humanely euthanized, for example. And then we link to the wiki page where the people can read about this syndrome so that they can also learn of like, oh, crap, I bred 2 horses together and now this happened. And the reason that we implemented this is because you're breeding a horse, your foal gets born, but now it's humanely euthanized. So it's sad that this foal got euthanized, but it was also just born, so you didn't really get that attached to it yet.
Yeah, perfect.
As with an adult horse, who you maybe you've already had it for 20 in-game years, you trained it up, you put so much effort in it. So I feel like in that case, we found that kind of balance where you can say, okay, this we can implement because we teach the people that this exists. It is something that you can actually test for in real life. It's a test that costs, I think, $20. You just have to do the test. Does my horse have this gene, yes or no? If yes, okay, maybe not breed it with another horse that also has it. And that way you can prevent the whole thing. So that's one of the things that I actually think is really cool, that some players who do breed in real life said like, oh, I didn't even know that was possible. They thought you could always see it. Like, it's a bit tricky to explain to people who don't know anything about the horses, but the overo gene is basically displayed as kind of like some sort of white patch on the horse. But that's what a lot of people think, that it has to be visible on the horse. But actually, it can also be hidden. You can't always see it. So people may think, oh, this horse is safe. It's fine. It doesn't have this gene because I don't see any white. But if you just do the test, it's $20.
Yeah.
And then you can just prevent the whole thing. And in real life, it would have cost you 11 months because a horse is pregnant for 11 months. And then you will find out that you have a foal like that, and then it has to be euthanized. It would be just a shame of all your money and time and everything that you spent.
Yeah.
and love, because you've been waiting for this fall. Your horse has been waiting for
Yeah,
this fall.
exactly.
So I feel like that is one of the things where we had this kind of like balance between, realism. You teach the people a little. You're not too attached yet to this fall, and then implementing it like that in the game.
And does the game also let you crossbreed, like two different breeds together? And what happens in horse breeding when you do that?
Well, we have not implemented that because we don't have this fancy 3D system that allows you to do it easily. We kind of felt like if we're called Horse Reality, then if you do crossbreed two breeds, you also want to show what that breed looks like.
Yeah.
And that is very art heavy. So for our art team, that would be a lot of work, especially right now. We already have 31 horse breeds. So that would mean that everybody would have to you would have to cross a Shetland pony with a Shire horse, which is a huge difference. So the problem,
Sad.
what will that look like? I don't think I want to know. So just for artists, it would be a lot of artwork. So that's why we decided not to do it. I think if we would have been a 3D game and you could do it dynamically with code, then it would be really interesting.
It would be nice, though.
It would be nice. I know a lot of players have been asking for it. Like, oh, well, it's not really realistic if you're called Horse Reality, but you can't breed two horses of different breeds together. But yeah, as a game developer, sometimes you also just need to make some decisions. And we were kind of like, well, it will just be way too much work to be able to put that in. The only thing that we would do at some point, maybe, and then a big maybe here, is there are some specific crossbreeds. So we have the Arabian horse and we have Frisians, for example. If you mix those two, you get the Arabo-Frisian. We could do that at some point. But for now, we've decided, let's just focus first on what we have and add new breeds before we start adding crossbreeding, because it's a lot of work.
Are people safe in this game, or do you get some toxic reactions that are actually really where people really suffer? Because I can imagine playing League of Legends. Yeah, of course, you're in the moment, you're making a mistake, you get sworn at, and you're like, okay, good, or you crash your keyboard, or you throw your mouse away, and you're like, I'm done with it. But breeding a horse in a game, in a slow game, so to say, could get you really attached to the game, which makes any bad comment hurt maybe even more. So how are you coping with that? How is your community coping with that?
Yeah, I would say that this is a tricky question. I feel like the majority of what we see is that the community is really helpful. They're really welcoming and supportive. So if you go to the forum and you're a new player and you're like, hey, I just started playing, I don't really know how it works or what I'm looking for, then you will find a lot of helpful people who've been playing the game for a long time who'll be like, oh, well, maybe you want to take a look at the wiki, or maybe I can help you with some horses. So a lot of times there's a big group of people where they're like, hey, I can lend you some of my horses, or I can get you some cash to get you started. Like, they are really supportive. But there is definitely also a group of people who are, I would say, harsher. I don't really have a term for it, but like, there's some people in the game who have been playing for quite a while. They know what they're doing. They know what they're looking for. And they're not always as nice to new people, especially since we have a wiki where you can find a lot of information. So sometimes you get some nasty comments like, oh, well, can't you just read the rules? Can't you just read the wiki? And I'm like, well, but also our game has so much that I can definitely see as a beginner, it's very overwhelming. So that's something we have on our roadmap to work on to make it, an easier onboarding journey, because you come into the game and you immediately see everything. You can go everywhere. So I can see how for a new player, it's a lot. But if you've been playing this game, and we have people who have been playing for 5-6 years, sure, you know everything. You know everything that we've been doing. Yeah. And it might look annoying if, the new people keep asking the same kind of questions. But that is actually not their problem. That is our problem. As a game studio, we need to make sure that the new people enter the game more easily and that they can get to this understanding. So that's why right now we have this on our roadmap to work on. Because for the older people, sometimes it creates frustration because they keep hearing the same stuff over and over again. and for other people, there's a lot to take in, so it's a bit much. But I think one of the problems, for example, is how attached people can be to their horses, and that, I think, horses in general is just a very tricky topic. In real life, you have, for example, inbreeding. What I know from, my uncle was breeding Friesians, my uncle and aunt. So I know with Friesians, for example, they're a very inbred breed, and the higher the percentage, the bigger the chance of mistakes. So a lot of people in the game also have opinions on that, like, oh no, you shouldn't be breeding, horses. I don't know, moms with son, and that kind of
inbreeding,
thing.
yeah,
And that's inbreeding.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are like, well, you know what? This is a game. Like, we know in real life we shouldn't do it, but you're playing a game for fun, so I am gonna do it here. Just gonna try and see what comes out. And in some cases, people just want this specific color or they want specific stats, and it's just easier to do breed mom with brother or with mom with son, for example, because increasing those stats just becomes a lot easier. But then other people have very big opinions on it, like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. And there's more stuff like that where you just know the horse community is very passionate about. And I feel like that is one of the things that is sometimes tricky. But we do put in our rules that, we don't allow harassment and that kind of stuff. So we always tell people, if someone is doing this, send a message to the support team, and then we can help you. And in our case, it means if people become too frustrating or too annoying, then you can get a warning. I don't know the exact rules anymore because my community manager handles all of that now, but usually you can get a warning, you can get banned temporarily, but you can also get permanently banned if you're cheating or just being extremely toxic, because it has happened a few times that there was a person who just kept harassing people for, in our eyes, literally something that does not make sense. So the easiest example, a horse's name. In our game, if you sell the horse is sold. The new person can now decide what they want to name their horse.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do is they put some kind of abbreviation for their stable, for example, in the horse's name. So I'm Deloryan Hommers, so maybe I would have DH and then Black Beauty whatsoever. Yeah. And then they say, if you buy my horses, you need to keep that in. No, they don't, because it's now their horse. You've sold it. You've sold the right to have anything to say about it. Yeah. And some people can get really, really extreme in this. And that we're just like, look, if you don't want your horses to get a different name, don't sell them. Keep them all yourself. But don't become so frustrating and don't start harassing people because they just changed the name. Because then we are really like, look, it's just a game. It's just a name of a horse. What are we making a fuss about?
Were you a gamer when you were younger? And how were you raised as a gamer? Did your family play games? Did your parents play games? Did they give you a lot of freedom?
If I have to go all the way back, I think that's when I still lived in Zotbommel with my mom and dad and one of my brothers at that time. I think I was about 5-6 years old, something like that. I think we had a Sega. And I don't think, it's not Tekken. Is it Street Fighter? It's the one where you have the tiger with the blue shorts, where you can fight.
It could be Street Fighter, yeah.
I think it was...
but it was like Tekken. It's a fight game.
It was kind of like one of those.
Yeah.
I think Tekken, Street Fighter, or Mortal Kombat. It's one of the three, like where you have the one with the tiger, and that's the one memory that I have. The tiger in the blue shorts, and then you're fighting against each other. I think that was my dad probably who bought that and wanted to do that. So that got me kind of interested already. Then my parents... broke up. So my mom went away. She took me and my brother with. Then we had, at some point, a stepdad, got another brother. So I have 2 brothers in total. My mom, and at that point, stepdad, he was not really into games. So I don't recall doing much there. I think I had a friend of my mom's who had a Nintendo 64. And it was that kind of period where it was like, single mom, 3 kids, or maybe at that point it was still 2, but she got a Sega, no, a Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
We had Mario, and I remember that we could borrow it from her. And I think maybe that is kind of how it got started, that we were playing the Mario game, and I had a really nice grandpa at that time who was totally into electronics. So that, I think, is the one part of the family that got us going with computers, and we all had one of those tiny TVs in the bedroom because it was just my grandpa. He was kind of like a hoarder. He got all the old stuff from other people, and I was like, "Oh, look here, I have a TV." So I do remember these times where, late at night, you secretly turn on your Nintendo and you're, I don't know, 10 or 12 years old. And you're playing on your Nintendo in the middle of the night, or at least it felt like the middle of the night. And then in the evening, you hear the door downstairs and you quickly turn off the TV and turn off everything. But my mom was smart. She heard everything. So she would come upstairs. She's like, "You're awake, aren't you?" And then you just pretend to sleep. What would she do? She would put her hand on the TV.
Of course, it was warm.
It was warm.
Yeah.
She was like, "I know you're awake. Like, I'm going to take away the Nintendo." Like, she would be, you have to sleep. You don't play games in the middle of the night. But I think probably because of my grandpa and having easy access to electronics, that we had a TV, we had a Nintendo that we could borrow from a friend. And I think at some point when I was around 12, I got my first PC. And that's when I started getting more into games. I played a lot of Sims. I played a lot of tycoon games, Zoo Tycoon, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I think at that point you had also kind of like a safari game. Like, it was not Zoo Tycoon, but you could create your whole like African safari kind of thing. And then you have all the the ones with the trains. But I think probably The Sims 2 and Zoo Tycoon I played a lot. Because, I am an animal lover. So I have to play games with animals. And Roller Coaster. I think, the CD that I had totally ruined it by playing it way too often. So that's the kind of game that I've always loved, is just the, what is it? A bit of simulation building,
management.
sandbox.
Yeah.
But if you can play at home with friends, like I'm good with that, like then at least I know you're here, you can't get kidnapped, nothing bad can happen if you go out, so
That's
to say.
a good one.
So I feel kind of like
Don't play outside, kids. Just go game.
I don't know if that was her reason, but I know that is one of the things that, she always felt like if you're at home, then at least I am here and I can keep an eye out. And it is tricky, right? If you're a single parent and you have to manage 3 kids, and in our case, there's a big age difference. Like, I am the oldest. So when I was 10, I had a brother of 5 and a newborn brother. So there is a 10-year age gap between me and the youngest, and then 5 years with the other one. My mom said that this is all what she wanted. She wanted a kid every 5 years, and then she wanted 3 in total. So she did. But it was, I would say, definitely a rough time, because she had to do it all by herself. So I was the oldest at home. So I would say that from an early age on, I kind of felt like the second mom, so to say, like helping in the household, helping how to cook. So I feel like I've grown up to be quite independent in that sense because of how we grew up.
And supportive.
And supportive, yeah. I think that was the most important thing. And I think I know where that came from. I think this is not something that I've actually told a lot of people, but the reason that my mom broke up with my dad is because he did things that dad should not do with me.
Oh.
So for me, it's quite easy to talk about because my mom has always supported me in that kind of sense. So apparently I told her that happened. I have the one big memory of my dad saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't tell your mom because if you tell her, I will kill her." So if you tell that to a 5-year-old, they're not going to tell anyone. And my mom said that I told her, and I still don't know because I'm like, he told me that. Like, I can't imagine myself telling you about it. But she was the kind of mom who was like, there's no way that a 5-year-old is going to come
Make
up with this and make this up.
No.
So on the same day, she packed her bags, she grabbed everything, she was out. And I feel like you also have stories where, kids try to tell their parents and the parents are like, "Oh, what are you talking about? Don't be so silly. Don't do this." So I feel very proud of having a mom who took that step and immediately took action.
Have you ever experienced difficulties in business as a woman game designer,
Um,
or is it actually helping you?
I might actually go for the second bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I have to think a little about how I'm answering this because I feel like, yes, there are definitely situations where it feels a bit tricky.
Hmm.
But there's also a lot of situations where it's kind of helping that I'm a woman because there are not that many women who make games.
Hmm.
And well, it's not that no one makes games, but like running a studio is. I'm one of the few in the Netherlands, I would say, where you have a woman as the business owner. And that means that, yeah, if I'm going to some kind of meetup, that a lot of the times I am one of the few women there, depending on what kind of meetup you go to. But if you're talking something that's soon coming up, is someone who organized a studio head dinner, then it's probably is me, and I know another girl now, so it's me, her, and the rest of the guys.
Yeah.
That's usually what's happening then. I've been a few times in this environment with investors. Most of the times it's me, maybe one or two other people, and at least 20, 30 guys. And I feel like in that kind of setting, because it's in a really, professional, especially with investors, you do have that kind of idea in your head about, are you going to meet these guys in suits and fancy with a briefcase? And well, sometimes, yeah, it does end up being like that. And that for me feels the most tricky because then, I don't know, I always feel a bit, how do you say that? Like, kind of like a minor there because for me, I don't have a game background. I don't have years of experience. I was one of the lucky few who turned her hobby into her work. So I only have 2 years of development experience at another company, and the rest I learned on the go. So if you come in such kind of a setting and you hear from people like, oh yeah, has 15 years experience here, has worked there, oh, AAA studio there, there, and there. For me, that feels kind of like, oh, these people really did something.
Like you need to prove yourself.
Like it gives me that kind of feeling, and I also do feel like that is maybe a little bit what women do sometimes. Because then when I talk to other people, they say, yeah, but you were able to make, you turn your hobby into your work. It's a game studio now of more than 10 people worldwide. You have a community of 20,000 people who's playing your game. There's
That's
quite
a serious
lot.
amount of people, right?
Yeah.
20,000.
Yeah, if I imagine all of them in a building, then it's at least you need a building, a quite big building to fill that up with 20K. So it's really strange, but it's also because it's all online, you don't really see it, which is different in some other areas, I would say. But then, yeah, if you're then in a setting with, investors or people from the game industry who've been there for so long and who have that much experience, then I always kind of feel like, oh, hi, hello, I'm also here. And I do know that, yeah, some people from the industry also say, like, what you did, like, most people can only dream of.
Yeah.
And that is something that I feel like I need to, I don't know, internalize somehow and be like, yeah, I did do this and I did get here. But yeah, I think just being the only woman in the room, that, yeah, somehow it does give me that feeling sometimes. And that, I hope I can change that.
Yeah, I think you say like maybe women tend to get that feeling. They need to prove themselves in a room filled with men. But also men do that to women, right? Do they actually approach you and are like, oh, how cool what you've done? Or do they ignore you? Because that makes a big, big difference, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I would say in the game industry, the whole industry is really supportive. So I feel like, I think it's more of a thing in my brain that I want to change than that is something from the community, because I feel like that is the really nice thing in the game industry, or at least in the Netherlands. I don't really know how it is outside. I know that in the US it can be really competitive. But I know in the Netherlands, we're such a small country, so the game community is even smaller. everybody who I talk to is always super supportive. They're always amazed by what I did, what our studio did. And yeah, people just ask you questions like, how did you do it? And how can they help me? So I feel like that has been really supportive, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I also can imagine, as there are so little women running a game studio or developing games, that you do actually stand out. Everyone in the industry
Yeah.
knows Deloryan.
Well, I can't speak for everyone, so I don't know if everyone knows me, but I think lately, especially since the last 1.5 year, I think I've gotten more known because I think in the beginning when I created the game, I was very focused on just the game. So I always call it like this tunnel vision. I remember a former employee of mine told me once, like, yeah, you have this tunnel vision, like you need to get out of it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I do need to show my face to the world. And especially when I've heard more and more people talk about me, because I know that JP from the Dutch Game Garden, he always used horse reality as an example because my office was at the Game Garden. So a lot of times he would be doing introductions to other people and then he would walk past all the game studios and start talking a bit about you. So at some point, I got more and more people coming up to me and they were talking about, hey, Deloryan's pretty cool what you did. And then, you have this whole conversation going. And I think that's also one of the parts where I kind of started thinking like, oh yeah, maybe I do need to do more and go outside of the office and start networking more. And I've also realized that that is one of the things that is just really important in this industry is to make connections because you can't do everything by yourself. So you need to talk with other people and then maybe they can help you get to the thing that you want. Yeah, there's this nice meme going around. We listen and we don't judge.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks again for having me here in this wonderful place and telling your story. I enjoyed it very much. So
Me too. Thank you to you too. Like I've never done a podcast before, so it was a really interesting experience for me to do this. And it's also really interesting to see like what are other people interested in and hearing about the whole journey of horse reality, of Studio Deloryan and myself. So yeah, it's been my pleasure and looking forward.